The first thing he said to me yesterday, it was ribbing me for that comment, saying, "How do you think redistricting is going for us?" Meaning, meaning that he thinks it's a lot better than we assumed on flyout day several months ago, Anna. So
happy to have you back, Mr. Jeffries. Happy to have you back and talk to us about it. Good morning, I'm Anna Palmer.
And I'm Jake Sherman.
And welcome to the Daily Punch, brought to you by Punchbowl News. It's Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. Let's get in the mix. Here are your Washington headlines of the day. Number one, we've got breaking news. Marco Rubio is going to testify on Capitol Hill. Number two, Dems mull how to vote on DHS spending. And number three, Senate Republicans react to Trump's endorsement of Julia Letlow, not their colleague, Bill Cassidy. All right, Jake, let's get into it. We are leading off Punchbowl News AM with some breaking defense news this morning. Marco Rubio will address lawmakers publicly for the first time next week on the United States' stunning capture of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Rubio, who also serves as Trump's national security advisor, will testify before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee next Wednesday at 10 a.m. A committee aide told us this will be a massive hearing, really important for both Republicans and Democrats because of concern when it comes to what this administration is doing with Venezuela.
And it won't only be Venezuela, Anna, and this will only happen next Wednesday if we're not buried under 600 feet of snow. But I'll give Brez credit on this one. He always says these snow forecasts are very, very bullish all the time, and they almost always come short.
I feel like, these snow forecasts coming from North Dakota, really, he's correct. I am with Brez on this. There's almost only one time in the history of 20 plus years of living in D.C. where I feel like it really met the moment. Correct.
Yes, Snowmageddon. that was like more than a decade ago. Okay, so this is a great scoop from Brianna Riley, our terrific defensive reporter, who scooped this morning on Rubio's appearance in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But remember, so he hasn't testified publicly since the Venezuela operation, but it's not only Venezuela that he'll be asked about, I assume. I assume it's Cuba, it's Iran, it's Greenland,
yeah,
it's Ukraine, Russia, it's Gaza, it's everything. I mean, his portfolio right now and the United States activity overseas is expansive and far-flung and all of that stuff, and who the hell knows what's going to happen in Davos this week. There might be a million more things to be asked that he'll be asked about. Now, does Rubio get a little bit of an easier time because he was a senator and he knows all of these people personally? Maybe a little bit, but there is just significant questions about the administration's activity on the global stage and whether Congress is being kept adequately abreast about those developments. And the questions on Venezuela, which ostensibly is what he's coming to talk about, are numerous, I would say, right? Like, it's what is the United States doing in Venezuela? What is our plans? What is the oil plan? I don't have to go over all of them, but there's a lot. And this will be a big appearance 1 week from today, January 28th.
I think the other point I would make is he was very involved in getting Republicans to stand down on the war powers efforts. And that, to me, is something to watch closely. What does he kind of publicly say about that? How do those commitments remain the same? Do you have pressure from Republicans here? Certainly, everybody's going to be listening very closely to what he says. Because, as you know, there has been a lot of skepticism, not just Democrats, about this administration's posture and war footing in the Caribbean, much less around the rest of the globe. And certainly, if you look at, we've been talking on this podcast about what happened with senators and the CODEL going to Denmark before Davos, right? And this kind of more strong, kind of stature that you had Senator Tom Tillis and others taking when it comes to NATO and the U.S.'s relationship with Denmark. That is also, I think, going to be, potentially one area to watch really, really closely because there's clearly Republicans who are uncomfortable with the president's posture when it comes to Greenland.
Yep. Absolutely right. And we'll see if some of that gets voiced to Rubio. To be clear, every Republican is lockstep behind the president. Maybe not most every, but a lot of Republicans are lockstep behind the president. And you've heard and we've noted in recent weeks that, a lot of people are saying, backing him up on Greenland. They don't believe that he's going to send troops in. So, yeah. Agreed.
All right, Jake, let's move on to the number 2 story of the morning. Some Democrats plan to vote for DHS funding. A number of vulnerable House Democrats are considering voting to fund the Department of Homeland Security despite a nationwide reckoning over ICE's deployment to major American cities. This is going to all come to the fore in a caucus meeting. There is a difference of opinion between the Progressive Caucus and some of these frontline Democrats, and we don't yet know whether or not House Democratic leadership will whip this bill.
Well, the interesting thing here is that this shows the big kind of chasm between what the base wants and what actual governing is like, right? Because conventional wisdom would indicate that Democrats will not vote to fund DHS with all of this stuff happening with ICE, with the Minnesota incident, with, ICE deploying around the country and its strong arm tactics in executing Trump's immigration agenda and policing agenda, quite frankly. But the prospect of voting against funding for DHS is difficult for a lot of Democrats. There's no question about that. So we've talked to, and this is mostly Max Cohen, Sammy Handler, and Ali Mutnick, who kind of spread out across the House Democratic Caucus last night and talked to a lot of vulnerable members who say, listen, I'm undecided. The basic message is, yeah, it's not great, but it's better than a CR, which would give the administration even more power to conduct its actions around the country. It's a bipartisan agreement. And quite frankly, most people not most people, but a lot of people don't want to vote against DHS funding. Henry Cuellar, the top Democrat on Homeland Approach, will brief the caucus today and will make a pitch to vote for DHS funding. And I talked to Hakeem Jeffries last night, and he said that they'll talk about it. They'll make a decision as a caucus what they'll do. Catherine Clark kind of said the same thing. Just as an aside, Anna, I haven't told you this yet, but Hakeem Jeffries did. If you remember on Flyout Day, we said, are you going to lose the House just based on redistricting? And the first thing he said to me yesterday, it was ribbing me for that comment, saying, how do you think redistricting is going for us? meaning that he thinks it's a lot better than we assumed on Flyout Day several months ago, Anna. So,
happy to have you back, Mr. Jeffries. Happy to have you back and talk to us about it.
Well, I'll tell you this, Anna. Lawmakers have a longer memory than most normal human beings.
So classic.
And by the way, another aside, as we scooped yesterday, Maryland made a redistricting move yesterday. The Redistricting Advisory Commission sent the state house 8-0 map. Yeah. So we'll have to see if they act on that.
We shall see. All right, let's run to the number 3 story of the morning. GOP leaders shrug at Bill Cassidy's primary woes. Talk about another awkward moment on Flyout Day was when we asked Bill Cassidy about whether or not he thought that the president was going to endorse in his race. And at that point, he did not think the president was going to endorse, but he clearly found out this week that he was. So Bill Cassidy having a challenge here, right? I mean, he is running for re-election. The president has now endorsed Juliette Lowe, who has put her, kind of flag in the race. And you've got Senate Republicans in an uncomfortable position. Most of them, Senator John Thune, Tim Scott, the NRSC chair, others are backing Bill Cassidy, their colleague, but they don't want to make a fight with the president on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. We also not to mention Flyout Day again, but we had Steve Scalise on Flyout Day, whenever that was, couple months ago or a month ago, and he wouldn't endorse Cassidy either. I can't imagine that's changed. Here's the reality: if the Trump political machine is going to spend on behalf of Letlow, which we assume that they will to get her through the primary, I don't think the general is that much of a problem, and SLF does not.
Senate Leadership Fund.
Yeah, Senate Leadership Fund, the Senate Republican Super PAC. That'll be a huge spending imbalance, right? If they pull out their bazooka, the Trump political machine, and there's no one on the other side backing Cassidy, I don't see how that works. I think Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise, the Speaker and the Majority Leader of the House, both from Louisiana, are going to stay very far away from this race. They're not going to I can't imagine they get involved in a race between two people that they know quite well, two members of their delegation. And, think that it's obviously a big problem in the Senate, but the way a lot of people look at this, Anna, is that this seat is staying red.
Right.
So what the hell does it matter if it's Bill Cassidy or Julia Letlow? And it'll be interesting to see if Cassidy really attacks Letlow. He's going to have to try to damage her as you do in a primary. And I don't know on what. And I think there's a lot of concern about that.
Yeah, I mean, even just the SLF president, Alex Latcham, saying, quote, anything that distracts from our efforts to beat Democrats in November is unhelpful.
Yeah. And by the way, that comment from Latcham, obviously they're in a tough position.
Right.
And they obviously would prefer the White House had not done this. But their point is like, we're not going to get into a spending war with Trump. We're just not going to do it. They have better places to spend their money.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you like the Daily Punch, share it on social media. Tell your friends. That's the best way for folks to find out about us. And you can go deeper on all these issues and more. There was a bunch more in the newsletter this morning that we didn't get to when it comes to SCOTUS, when it comes to a bunch of other things. I encourage you to check out punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.